My name is Jane, and at 56 I still wake up every morning surprised by the twists life has taken. 3 years ago, I inherited $8 million from my estranged father, money I never expected or felt I deserved. When my only daughter Megan got engaged last year, I made the difficult decision to keep my inheritance a secret from her. Everyone thought I was crazy, but after what happened following her wedding to Tyler, keeping that money hidden turned out to be the smartest decision I ever made. If you're watching this from your living room or kitchen table, hit that like button and subscribe to hear the full story of how hiding my wealth from my daughter ultimately saved her from a devastating future. I grew up in a small town called Oak Ridge, just outside of Eugene, Oregon. My childhood was firmly working class. My mother was a seamstress who worked from our dining room. And my father, well, he was complicated. He came from money, but had rejected his wealthy family to marry my mother. At least that was the romantic story they told until I was 12. The truth emerged one rainy Tuesday when he packed a suitcase, told me he needed more from life, and walked out our front door. We later learned he'd reconnected with his family, taken over his father's investment firm in Portland, and essentially erased us from his new, affluent existence. Child support checks arrived punctually every month, but no cards, no calls, no visits. Just cold, impersonal financial transactions until I turned 18, when even those stopped. My mother never badmouthed him, but she instilled in me a wariness about wealth and the entitlement it could breed. "Money shows who people really are, Janie," she would say while stitching late into the night. "It doesn't change people, it just amplifies what was already there." I put myself through nursing school at Oregon State University, working evenings as a waitress and weekends at a care home. That's where I met David Thompson during my junior year. He was visiting his grandmother, bringing her homemade cookies and reading to her from her favorite poetry books. I fell in love with his kindness before I even knew his name. David was studying to become a science teacher, another profession of passion rather than profit. We married the summer after graduation in my mother's backyard, surrounded by homemade decorations and potluck dishes. Our honeymoon was camping at Crater Lake. Not glamorous, but those 5 days in a tent with David remain among the happiest of my life. We bought a small craftsman house in southeast Portland with peeling paint and outdated everything. Over weekends and summer breaks, we renovated it room by room, learning from library books and friendly hardware store employees. David would joke that our house was held together by YouTube tutorials and stubborn determination. Megan arrived 3 years into our marriage after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages. From the moment the doctor placed her in my arms, I promised her opportunities that had eluded me. David and I committed to giving her access to education travel and experiences that would broaden her horizons, even if it meant sacrificing in other areas. We lived simply but deliberately. Our furniture came from thrift stores, but Megan attended piano lessons and science camps. We drove the same reliable Honda for 15 years, but we took educational family road trips every summer. Christmas gifts were modest, but Megan's college fund grew steadily with every paycheck. David taught environmental science at Grant High School, beloved by students for making complex concepts accessible through hands-on experiments. I worked at Providence Portland Medical Center as an ER nurse, eventually becoming a nursing supervisor. Our combined income placed us firmly in the middle class, and we were content with that. My father's existence became a distant footnote in our lives. Occasionally I'd see his name in the business section of the Oregonian, or hear about his company's success, but it felt like reading about a stranger. David gently suggested reaching out a few times, especially after Megan was born, thinking perhaps a grandchild might bridge the divide. I considered it briefly, but couldn't move past the abandonment. Why invite that potential pain into Megan's life? As Megan grew, She displayed David's scientific curiosity and my stubborn persistence. She was fascinated by marine biology from the moment we took her to the Oregon Coast Aquarium when she was 7. By high school, she was volunteering there every weekend, commuting 2 hours each way by bus. Her dedication impressed us even as we wished we could provide her with easier access to her passion. David and I managed to help Megan graduate from University of Oregon debt-free, an achievement that required second jobs and careful budgeting. When she was accepted to a prestigious marine biology graduate program in San Diego, we refinanced our house to help with her expenses. Education was our family's priority investment. Our carefully constructed life shattered 5 years ago when David was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start, but we fought anyway, because that's what the Thompson family did, faced challenges head-on with determination and hope. Despite having decent health insurance through the school district, the medical bills accumulated rapidly. Experimental treatments, medications not covered by insurance, and complementary therapies recommended by specialists all required payment up front. I picked up extra shifts, sold our second car, and eventually took out a second mortgage on our home. David fought for 14 months before his body surrendered. He died peacefully in our bedroom, overlooking the garden he had cultivated for 23 years, with Megan and me holding his hands. His last coherent words to me were, "Take care of yourself too, Janie. Promise me." The year following David's death passed in a fog of grief and practicality. I returned to full-time nursing within 2 weeks because bills don't pause for heartbreak. Megan, who had temporarily moved home during David's final months, returned to finish her master's degree. We were both working through our pain by focusing on the futures David had wanted for us. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Is this Jane Thompson?" a formal male voice asked one October morning. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Lawrence Goldstein. I'm an attorney with Bergman Goldstein and Powell in Portland. I'm calling regarding the estate of Robert Winters." My father's name spoken aloud after so many years of silence felt like a physical jolt. "Mr. Winters passed away last week. As his only living child, you are the primary beneficiary of his estate." I gripped the kitchen counter, certain this was some cruel mistake or scam. "There must be some confusion. Robert Winters and I haven't spoken in over 40 years. "There's no confusion, Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Winters updated his will 3 years ago following his diagnosis with heart disease. He left specific instructions regarding your inheritance." The attorney explained that my father had amassed considerable wealth through his investment firm and property holdings. With no other family, he never remarried or had other children. He had designated me as his heir. The inheritance totaled just over $8 million, including liquid assets, investment portfolios, and real estate holdings. My first instinct was to refuse it all. What right did he have to suddenly reappear in my life through his money, when he couldn't bother to meet his granddaughter or attend his son-in-law's funeral? The inheritance felt tainted by decades of absence and silence. That evening I sat in David's garden, mentally constructing an email declining the inheritance. But as the sunset painted our modest home in golden light, I remembered David's practical nature. He would have considered this an opportunity to secure Megan's future, pay off our debts, and perhaps do some good in the world. "Money is just a tool, Janie," I could almost hear him say. "It's how you use it that matters." After a sleepless night, I called Mr. Goldstein and scheduled a meeting. Within weeks, I had become the reluctant heiress to a fortune that seemed surreal compared to the financial constraints that had defined my entire adult life. I decided not to tell Megan immediately. She was focused on completing her research thesis, and I wanted to process this development before potentially disrupting her life with it. I told myself it was temporary secrecy, just until I figured out the best approach. The inheritance allowed me to retire early from nursing at 53, explaining to Megan that careful saving and my pension made it possible. I paid off both mortgages on our house but continued living modestly. No luxury car, no lavish redecorating, no extravagant trips, just freedom from financial worry for the first time in my life. Working with a financial advisor recommended by Eleanor, a former physician colleague who had retired into philanthropy, I invested most of the money conservatively. I also established a small educational foundation in David's name, providing scholarships for high school students pursuing teaching careers in science. As months passed without sharing my secret, it became increasingly difficult to find the right moment. Megan had secured her dream job as a marine biologist at the Oregon Coast Aquarium, moving back to Portland and renting a small apartment near her work. Our weekly dinner traditions resumed, and our relationship settled into a new normal without David. 3 years after receiving the inheritance, I still hadn't disclosed it to anyone except my financial team and lawyer. The money had become my private responsibility, a strange secret life running parallel to my visible one. I sometimes wondered what David would think of my continued silence, but the longer I waited, the more complicated explaining it became. Then Megan called one February evening, her voice bubbling with an excitement I hadn't heard since before David's illness. "Mom," she practically sang through the phone, "I've met someone. And he's amazing." Little did I know that this announcement would ultimately validate my decision to keep $8 million a secret. Megan's voice on the phone that February evening carried a breathless quality I hadn't heard from my daughter in years. After David's death, she had thrown herself into her work at the Oregon Coast Aquarium with single-minded dedication. Her research on ocean acidification's effects on Pacific Northwest marine ecosystems had recently been published in a prestigious scientific journal, bringing her professional recognition, but leaving little time for personal relationships. "His name is Tyler," she continued excitedly. "Tyler Blackwood. We met at a fundraiser for the aquarium last month. He's in real estate investment, Mom. So smart and driven." I felt a familiar maternal mixture of happiness and caution. At 28, Megan was certainly entitled to romantic excitement, but her limited dating experience since college made her somewhat naive about relationships. "That's wonderful, honey. When do I get to meet him?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Could you come to dinner at my place this Saturday? He's really eager to meet you." That detail, his eagerness to meet me, registered faintly in my mind, but didn't trigger any particular concern. Of course, a good man would want to meet his girlfriend's mother. Megan's apartment was uncharacteristically spotless when I arrived Saturday evening. New candles flickered on her typically cluttered dining table, and I spotted several unfamiliar decorative pillows on her sofa. Small changes that suggested someone else's influence. Tyler arrived 10 minutes later, filling the small space with his presence. He was conventionally handsome, tall with dark hair, artfully styled, wearing a button-down shirt that looked more expensive than anything in Megan's closet. His smile revealed perfectly maintained teeth, and he carried a bouquet of elaborate flowers and a bottle of wine that I recognized as costing well above my daughter's usual budget. "Mrs. Thompson." He greeted me with unexpected warmth, leaning in for a hug instead of the handshake I'd anticipated. "I've heard so much about you. Megan speaks of you with such admiration." "Please call me Jane," I replied, accepting the hug awkwardly. As Megan busied herself in the kitchen, Tyler engaged me in easy conversation, asking thoughtful questions about my nursing career and life in Portland. He had an undeniable charm, maintaining direct eye contact and laughing appreciatively at my mild jokes. I could see why Megan was captivated. The first subtle note of discord came during dinner when he casually mentioned the Ferrari he'd recently test-driven. Just a weekend toy, he said with a dismissive wave. My business partners insist image matters in high-end real estate. Personally, I'd be happy with something more practical. Megan looked at him with naked admiration, while I wondered about the pressure of maintaining such appearances on what I assumed was a commission-based income. What kind of properties do you typically handle? I asked, genuinely curious about his work. Luxury developments, mostly. My firm has projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. He mentioned several upscale Portland neighborhoods and developments I recognized. We just closed on a waterfront property package worth about $40 million. My commission on that one was... He paused, glancing at Megan. Well, let's just say it was substantial. Throughout the evening, Tyler expertly wove mentions of wealthy clients' exclusive clubs and investment opportunities into the conversation. Each reference seemed casual but calculated. More concerning was how Megan hung on his every word, a scientist who normally questioned everything, suddenly accepting every statement without her usual critical analysis. As I helped Megan clear dessert plates, Tyler asked about our family with apparent casual interest. So it's just been you two since David passed, no other family in the picture? My mother died about 10 years ago, I explained. David was an only child whose parents died before Megan was born. And your side parents' siblings? I hesitated slightly before responding. My father left when I was young. We weren't in contact, no siblings. Tyler nodded sympathetically. Family can be complicated. Were you able to reconcile before he passed? The specificity of the question startled me. I hadn't mentioned that my father had died. We didn't, I said simply. How did you know he'd passed away? Tyler didn't miss a beat. Oh, Megan mentioned it earlier when she was telling me about your family. My eyes met Megan's, and she nodded confirmation, though I couldn't recall ever discussing my father's death with her in any detail. I had simply told her he had died deliberately vague about the inheritance. As the evening wound down, Tyler insisted on calling me a rideshare service rather than letting me take the bus home. A beautiful woman shouldn't be taking public transportation at night, he declared, brooking no argument as he tapped his smartphone. In the privacy of the back seat, I reflected on the dinner. Tyler was undeniably charming, and his affection for Megan seemed genuine. Yet something felt calculated about him, as though each interaction had been choreographed for maximum impact. Over the next few weeks, Megan and Tyler became inseparable. Her calls now always included references to places Tyler had taken her people he knew, or gifts he'd given her. My scientifically minded daughter, who had once spent weekends in Waiters collecting title specimens, was now posting social media photos from exclusive restaurants and weekend trips to wine country. A month after our dinner, Megan called to tell me Tyler had given her a key to his downtown condo. It makes more sense than my little place, she explained. It's closer to everything, and he has an actual office I can use when I'm writing reports. That's a big step after just a few weeks, I observed carefully. Are you sure you're not moving too quickly? Mom. Her voice carried a hint of impatience. When you know, you know. Tyler says we're perfectly aligned in our life goals. That phrase, Tyler says, began appearing with increasing frequency in our conversations. Tyler says investing in cryptocurrency is smarter than my retirement fund. Tyler says my wardrobe needs upgrading if I'm going to attend events with his clients. Tyler says I should consider a more prestigious position than the aquarium. My unease grew when Megan arrived for our monthly lunch wearing a designer watch that had to cost several $1,000s. When I commented on it, she casually mentioned it was just a little something Tyler had surprised her with. Can he really afford gifts like that? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. You've only been dating 2 months. Her expression clouded. Tyler is very successful, Mom. He made some incredible investments last year. Besides, he says he'd rather spend money creating memories and making me happy than have it sitting in a bank. That sentiment contradicted everything David and I had taught her about financial responsibility, but challenging it directly would only create distance between us. Instead, I asked general questions about Tyler's business, hoping she might reflect on how little she actually knew about his financial situation. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Megan with a photo of her hand sporting an enormous diamond ring. He proposed call me. 4 months. They had known each other just 4 months. When I called, Megan was ecstatic, describing how Tyler had arranged a helicopter tour of the Oregon coast landing on a private beach, where a chef had prepared a gourmet picnic. The proposal included the ring, which she proudly told me was nearly 3 carats and custom designed, and promises of a life filled with adventure and luxury. "Isn't it fast?" I ventured cautiously. "You're still getting to know each other." "Mom, I'm almost 29. I know what I want, and it's Tyler." Her voice hardened slightly. "I was hoping you'd just be happy for me." I backpedaled quickly, congratulating her and asking about their plans. The wedding was set for just 3 months away, an unusually short engagement that Tyler insisted upon because, when you're sure, why wait? That evening, I did something I never imagined I would do. I hired a private investigator to look into Tyler Blackwood's background. The decision felt like a betrayal of Megan's trust, but my instincts, as both a mother and a former ER nurse who had seen countless situations go badly, were screaming for caution. The investigator's initial report arrived a week later, confirming my fears. Tyler Blackwood presented himself as a successful real estate investor, but his actual financial situation appeared precarious. He maintained multiple credit cards, most at or near their limits. His investment firm consisted of himself and a virtual office address. His downtown condo carried a massive mortgage with 2 missed payments in the previous year. Most concerning, this wasn't his first whirlwind romance. The investigator uncovered a pattern of Tyler dating women from wealthy families or with promising careers, lavishing them with attention and gifts, then gradually gaining access to their finances. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the report and wrestling with an impossible dilemma. If I showed Megan this information, she would likely see it as an unforgivable invasion of her privacy and reject both the evidence and me. If I said nothing, I might be allowing her to make a devastating mistake. I tried a gentle approach the next day over coffee, suggesting premarital counseling and financial planning discussions before the wedding. "It's important to understand each other's money management styles and expectations," I explained. Megan's response was defensive. "Tyler and I have already discussed everything, Mom. We're totally aligned on our future. He's helping me understand how limiting my thinking has been about money and career advancement." "What do you mean, limiting?" "Just that I've been playing small, staying comfortable. Tyler says with my intelligence I should be consulting for major corporations on environmental impact, not working at a regional aquarium for a nonprofit salary." The words didn't sound like my daughter, who had always valued purpose over profit. They sounded like someone else speaking through her. As wedding plans accelerated, Tyler's questions about my financial situation became more frequent and direct, often relayed through Megan. Did I own my house outright after refinancing? Had I considered downsizing now that I lived alone? What was I doing with my retirement savings from the hospital? Each question seemed innocent enough in isolation, but formed a troubling pattern. The most disturbing incident came when Megan casually mentioned, "Tyler was wondering if Grandpa Robert left you anything when he died. He said sometimes estranged parents leave surprise inheritances out of guilt." That evening, I called my financial advisor and instructed him to ensure all traces of my inheritance were secure and private. My decision not to disclose the $8 million was no longer about timing or processing. It had become a necessary protection. The wedding planning quickly spiraled from what I had envisioned as a modest celebration into an extravagant event that seemed designed to impress rather than to honor Meghan and Tyler's relationship. What began as discussions about the local botanical garden transformed into contracts with Waverly Country Club, one of Portland's most exclusive venues. Tyler has connections there, Meghan explained when I expressed surprise at the change. One of his clients is on the board and arranged a special rate. That special rate still came with a $50,000 price tag just for the venue. When I offered to contribute that amount toward the overall wedding expenses, Meghan's surprise was evident. "You can afford that, Mom," I thought, with retirement. I had prepared my explanation carefully. "I've always saved for your wedding day, honey. Between my retirement package from the hospital and careful investing over the years, I've set aside enough to give you a beautiful celebration." The truth was more complicated. I had indeed saved a wedding fund for Meghan since her childhood, about $15,000. The remaining $35,000 came from my inheritance money I could now access without raising suspicions. Tyler's reaction to my financial contribution was telling. When Meghan told him, he immediately called me. "Jane, that's incredibly generous." He said, his voice warm with what I now recognized as calculated charm. Though Meghan and I were discussing whether that money might be better used as a down payment on property. The wedding could be more intimate. "The money is specifically for the wedding," I replied firmly. "I want to give Meghan the celebration she deserves." What I didn't say was that property would benefit Tyler far more directly than a wedding. A house would become a marital asset, while wedding expenses simply created a memorable event. Tyler pivoted smoothly. "Of course you're absolutely right. Then let's make it spectacular." And spectacular it became. The guest list expanded from Meghan's original 75 people to over 250, with Tyler adding business associates and connections I suspected he barely knew. The flowers, initially budgeted at $2,000, somehow became a $15,000 extravaganza of imported blooms. The simple buffet evolved into a 5-course seated dinner with wine pairings. Throughout the planning, I noticed Tyler's family remained conspicuously uninvolved. His parents, who lived in Seattle, made no financial contribution, despite Tyler's frequent references to their success in real estate development. When I asked Meghan about this, she became defensive. "They offered, Mom, but Tyler wanted us to do this ourselves. He's very independent that way." One evening, while Meghan was trying on her dress in another room of the bridal boutique, I overheard Tyler on his phone in the waiting area, unaware of my presence behind a decorative screen. "It's all coming together perfectly," he was saying in a hushed tone. "The nurse is more loaded than we thought. She's dropping 50 grand on the wedding without blinking. No, I haven't figured out where it's coming from yet, but there's definitely more there. Once we're married, accessing it gets much easier. Right. 6 more weeks, then we're in." My blood ran cold. There was no innocent explanation for that conversation. I slipped away before he could realize I'd overheard, my mind racing with the implications. Tyler wasn't just marrying my daughter, he was executing a plan to access money he believed I had hidden. That night, I called Eleanor, my former colleague, who had become a trusted confidant since my inheritance. "I'm worried this man is a predator," I confessed after explaining the situation. "He's rushing Meghan into marriage, isolating her from her former life, and clearly fishing for financial information about me." Eleanor's response was measured but direct. "Jane, have you considered telling Meghan about the inheritance now? If Tyler's motives are financial, she should have all the facts." I had considered it countless times, but my instincts held me back. If I tell her and she tells him, it could make the situation worse. He might accelerate his plans or become even more determined to marry her, or if she confronts him and he's convincing enough, I could lose her trust entirely. "Then perhaps it's time to protect that money more formally," Eleanor suggested. "Talk to your attorney about creating irrevocable trusts or other structures that would shield assets even in the event that Meghan marries someone with predatory intentions." The next morning, I met with my estate attorney and established a complex trust structure that would protect the bulk of my assets from any potential claims through Megan. The arrangement ensured Megan would eventually inherit, but with provisions that would keep the money secure from marital claims if her marriage ended in divorce. As the wedding approached, Tyler's interest in my financial situation intensified. He began stopping by my house unexpectedly, commenting on repairs it might need or improvements that would increase its value when it's time to sell. He asked pointed questions about my retirement accounts and whether I had considered more aggressive investment strategies that he'd be happy to advise on. Most disturbing was his suggestion that Megan and I should consider combining households after the wedding. "That house is too big for just you, Jane. You could live with us in whatever property we buy. It would save you maintenance costs, and we could invest the proceeds from your house." The suggestion was presented as concern for my welfare, but the predatory undertones were unmistakable. He wanted access to my assets, and marriage to Megan was his route to achieving that goal. 2 weeks before the wedding, Megan called with news that left me speechless. "Tyler's lawyer has drawn up a prenuptial agreement," she said, her voice attempting cheerfulness, but betraying uncertainty. "It's just a formality, of course. Tyler says it actually protects me more than him." "Has your own attorney reviewed it?" I asked carefully. "Well, no. Tyler says his lawyer made sure everything is fair. It's standard language." "Megan," I said gently, "never sign a legal document, especially one as important as a prenup, without your own independent legal counsel. That's not just mother's advice, that's basic legal wisdom." "You don't trust Tyler," she accused, her voice hardening. "You've never given him a real chance." "This isn't about trust. It's about protecting yourself. Even in the happiest marriages, both parties should have equal representation in legal matters." The conversation ended with Megan agreeing to at least read the document carefully before signing, though she remained resistant to hiring her own attorney, citing the expense and Tyler's insistence that it was unnecessary. Later that day, I received a call from Tyler himself, his tone noticeably cooler than his usual charm offensive. "Jane, Megan mentioned your concerns about the prenuptial agreement. I want to assure you it's completely standard and protects both our interests." "I'm sure it is, Tyler. I just think Megan should have her own attorney review it, as would be standard practice." A slight pause. "That seems like an unnecessary expense at this point. We've already spent so much on the wedding." "I'd be happy to cover the cost of an attorney for her," I offered. "That's not necessary," he replied quickly. "I'll have my lawyer walk her through it in detail." The conversation left me more convinced than ever that the agreement favored Tyler significantly, possibly including provisions that would give him access to assets Megan might inherit from me in the future. With the wedding just 10 days away, I made a final attempt at protection. I met with my estate attorney and created a letter to be given to Megan in the event of my death, explaining the inheritance and the protective trusts I had established. The letter included a detailed account of my concerns about Tyler's financial motives, with copies of the private investigator's findings. I gave the sealed envelope to Eleanor with instructions to deliver it to Megan personally if anything happened to me. "Do you really think that's necessary?" Eleanor asked, concerned by the cloak-and-dagger nature of the arrangement. "I hope not," I replied. "But Tyler's behavior suggests he's capable of going to significant lengths for financial gain. I need to know Megan will have the full truth if I'm not here to provide it." The final week before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of vendor confirmations, last-minute changes, and rehearsal arrangements. Megan signed the prenuptial agreement despite my concerns insisting it was fair and protected both of them. I chose not to push further, knowing it would only create more division between us at a time when she needed support. The night before the wedding, as I laid out my mother of the bride outfit, I contemplated once more whether I should tell Megan about the inheritance before she said, "I do." but revealing it now, I reasoned, would only create chaos and confusion on what should be a joyful day. Better to wait and watch, to be there for her whatever came after the vows were exchanged. Little did I know how quickly those vows would be tested, or how grateful I would be for my decision to keep $8 million a secret. The morning of Megan's wedding dawned with the perfect weather we had hoped for: clear blue skies and mild temperatures unusual for Portland in May. I arrived at Waverly Country Club early to help with final arrangements, finding the venue transformed into a showcase of luxury. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in to hang from the outdoor tent. Imported roses and orchids adorned every surface. A string quartet played softly as an army of staff arranged place settings featuring gold-rimmed china and monogrammed napkins. It was beautiful, certainly, but felt more like a theatrical production than a celebration of my daughter's relationship. Nothing about the event reflected Megan's former love of nature science or simplicity qualities that had defined her before meeting Tyler. In the bridal suite, I found Megan surrounded by a makeup artist, hairstylist, and 3 bridesmaids I barely knew. Friends of Tyler's sister, rather than Megan's longtime colleagues from the aquarium. "Mom," she exclaimed when she saw me momentarily looking like my daughter again beneath the unfamiliar makeup. "Isn't this amazing? Tyler arranged everything." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her elaborately styled hair. "You look beautiful, honey. How are you feeling? Excited? Nervous? Everything all at once?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Did you see Tyler's parents arrive? I haven't met them yet." That detail, marrying someone whose parents she had never met, would have sent up red flags for the Megan I knew before Tyler. But she seemed to accept it as normal now, another sign of how quickly her perspective had shifted. "I haven't seen them, but I'm sure they're here," I reassured her, making a mental note to seek them out. I found Tyler's parents during the pre-ceremony reception, a reserved couple who seemed uncomfortable with the extravagant surroundings. Harold Blackwood shook my hand firmly, while his wife Linda offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lovely to finally meet you," I said. "Megan is so excited to become part of your family." Harold cleared his throat awkwardly. "Yes, well, it's all happened rather quickly, hasn't it?" Linda shot him a warning glance before adding, "Tyler has always been impulsive when he sets his mind on something." Their lukewarm response and obvious tension suggested they had reservations about the match, or perhaps about their son in general. Before I could engage them further, Tyler appeared looking immaculate in his tuxedo. "I see you've met the parents," he said smoothly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, Dad, isn't Jane wonderful? She's been so generous with the wedding." The way he emphasized generous while looking meaningfully at his parents made me suspect he had created a narrative about my financial situation that didn't align with reality. As guests began taking their seats for the ceremony, I observed Tyler working the room like a politician. He was warmest with the obviously wealthy attendees, identifying them by their attire and jewelry before I even heard their names. With others, his interactions were briefer, less engaged. It was like watching someone assign value to human beings in real time. The ceremony itself was mercifully short, though Megan's vows, clearly influenced by Tyler's perspective, included phrases about building a life of abundance and achieving our highest potential together, rather than the deeper commitments to support, understanding, and partnership I had expected from my thoughtful daughter. During the reception, I gave a speech focused on love partnership and the values David and I had tried to instill in Megan. I spoke about marriage requiring mutual support through challenges, not just celebrations of success. As I talked, I noticed Tyler's expression shift from polite attention to subtle impatience, especially when I mentioned how David and I had valued purpose over profit in our own marriage. May you both find the balance between ambition and compassion, between achieving goals and cherishing each moment along the way. I concluded, raising my glass to the newlyweds. Tyler's speech afterward emphasized different priorities: the empire he and Meghan would build together, the unlimited potential of their union, the strategic advantages of combining their talents. He spoke more like a CEO announcing a merger than a man celebrating finding his life partner. As the evening progressed, I noticed Tyler drinking heavily, his carefully maintained charm slipping occasionally to reveal irritation or dismissiveness, particularly toward service staff. During a momentary lull in the music, I overheard him arguing with his best man near the bar. "You were supposed to handle that before today," Tyler hissed. "The timeline is critical now. Once we're back from Bali, everything needs to be in place." "It's complicated, man," his friend responded, looking uncomfortable. "The paperwork takes time and there are questions about the collateral." "Just make it happen," Tyler snapped before noticing me nearby and immediately transforming his expression into a broad smile. "Jane, having a wonderful time. Everything is perfect, isn't it?" I smiled and agreed, filing away the concerning interaction as another piece in the increasingly troubling puzzle of who Tyler Blackwood really was. By the time Meghan and Tyler departed for their honeymoon, a 2-week stay at an exclusive resort in Bali that I suspected was far beyond their actual budget, I was emotionally exhausted. I returned to my quiet house, kicked off the uncomfortable heels I'd worn all day, and allowed myself a moment of relief that the wedding was over. My phone chimed with a text from Meghan. "Off to paradise with my husband. Thank you for everything, Mom. Love you." I responded with appropriate enthusiasm, hoping against hope that perhaps I had misjudged Tyler. Perhaps his love for Meghan was genuine despite his obvious interest in financial gain. Perhaps they could build a happy life together after all. That fragile hope lasted less than 24 hours. The morning after the wedding, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found myself facing a young woman I didn't recognize, petite with dark hair and anxious eyes. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked hesitantly. "My name is Amanda Reeves. You don't know me, but we need to talk about Tyler Blackwood. Your daughter is in danger, not physically, but financially and emotionally. I know because I was in her position 2 years ago." I invited her in my heart, racing with the confirmation of my worst fears, as she began sharing a story disturbingly similar to what I had been witnessing with Meghan. Meanwhile, across the world in Bali, my daughter was about to discover her own devastating truth about the man she had just married. Amanda Reeves sat across from me at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes and a nervousness that manifested in constant small movements, tucking hair behind her ear, adjusting her sleeve, tapping her fingernails against the ceramic mug. "I saw the wedding announcement in the Oregonian," she explained. "The photo of Tyler with your daughter. I couldn't just do nothing. Not again." According to Amanda, she had met Tyler 3 years earlier at a charity gala in Seattle. Like with Meghan, their relationship had progressed at whirlwind speed: romantic gestures, expensive gifts, and a proposal after just 4 months. "My family has money," she said simply. "Not extreme wealth, but my father owns a successful construction company. Tyler figured that out within minutes of meeting me." Their engagement had lasted slightly longer than Meghan and Tyler's 6 months, but followed the same pattern of increasing isolation from friends and family, subtle and not so subtle changes to Amanda's appearance and lifestyle, and a lavish wedding that Tyler insisted was essential to their brand as a couple. 2 months after the wedding, he suggested I ask my father for investment capital for a guaranteed return property deal, she continued. When I hesitated, he became different. The charm disappeared. He started criticizing everything about me: my intelligence, my appearance, my family loyalty. Amanda's father had been suspicious of Tyler from the beginning and refused the investment request, prompting escalating tension. Tyler had then convinced Amanda to take out a home equity loan on a condo she owned before their marriage, using the funds for what turned out to be a non-existent development opportunity. When the money was gone over $200,000, he became cruel, said I was worthless to him if I couldn't access more capital. When I finally confronted him with evidence that the investment was fraudulent, he didn't even deny it. He just laughed and said I should have been smarter. Their marriage had lasted just 11 months before Amanda filed for divorce, but the financial and emotional damage had taken much longer to address. She was still in therapy and working to rebuild her credit and self-confidence. "I'm not the first, and your daughter won't be the last," she said, finally meeting my eyes directly. "There was someone before me, a woman named Heather, whose parents owned a chain of restaurants. Tyler targets women with access to family money. It's calculated and deliberate." From her purse, Amanda withdrew a folder containing documentation of her experience financial records showing transfers to accounts. Tyler controlled text messages, revealing his manipulative tactics and photos of them together during happier times when she still believed in their relationship. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because it's not too late for your daughter. My biggest regret is that I didn't listen when Heather tried to warn me about Tyler. I thought she was bitter jealous. I believed Tyler when he said she was mentally unstable." Amanda's voice broke slightly. "If I'd listened, I would have saved myself so much pain." As Amanda continued sharing details that aligned perfectly with Tyler's behavior toward Megan, my phone began buzzing with notifications. The wedding venue was calling about unexpected charges to the account. The florist was contacting me about a payment discrepancy. The photographer needed clarification on an additional invoice Tyler had apparently authorized without discussion. While Amanda was still there, I received an even more concerning call from my credit card company's fraud department. Someone had attempted to make several large purchases using my card information charges in Bali for jewelry, electronics, and luxury goods totaling over $20,000. "Did you authorize these purchases, Mrs. Thompson?" the fraud specialist asked. "Absolutely not," I replied, my stomach tightening as I realized the implications. Somehow, Tyler had acquired my credit card information, likely through Megan's access to my purse during wedding preparations. After declining the charges and arranging for a new card, I thanked Amanda for her courage in coming forward and promised to keep her information confidential. We exchanged contact information, creating an unexpected alliance in the face of Tyler's deception. "Be prepared," Amanda warned as she was leaving. "When Tyler realizes his plan isn't working, he can become vindictive. Document everything, and please tell your daughter I'm willing to talk with her when she's ready. I wish someone had been there for me." Over the next few days, I worked methodically to protect myself financially, changing all my passwords, adding extra security measures to my accounts, and alerting my financial team to watch for any unusual activity. I still hoped Megan might be enjoying her honeymoon in blissful ignorance that perhaps the issues with the wedding vendors were misunderstandings rather than deliberate deceptions. That hope evaporated 6 days into their 2-week trip when Megan called from Bali, her voice small and broken in a way I hadn't heard since her father died. "Mom," she said clearly, trying not to cry. "Something's wrong. Tyler is different here." "Different how, honey?" I asked, keeping my tone calm despite my racing heart. "He keeps asking about money, your money specifically. He was going through my phone looking for your banking information." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "He got really angry when I told him I don't have access to your accounts. He said I was useless if I couldn't even get basic financial information from my own mother." My chest tightened at the thought of my daughter alone in a foreign country with a man who was now showing his true colors. "Where is he now?" "At the hotel bar. He's been drinking a lot." She paused, her voice becoming even quieter. "Last night he said something weird. He said he'd married me because he thought you had received a large inheritance from your father. But apparently I was too stupid to even know about my own family money. The irony of his statement, so accurate yet completely unknown to both him and Megan, might have been amusing under different circumstances. Megan, listen to me carefully. Do you feel physically safe right now? Yes, she said after a moment. He's never been physically threatening, just cruel with his words, and focused on money constantly. I want you to book a flight home, today if possible. But the honeymoon is clearly not what either of you expected, I finished gently. Come home, Megan. We'll figure this out together. After some resistance, she agreed to look into flights. I immediately contacted my travel agent to arrange alternatives in case Megan encountered difficulties, ensuring there would be multiple options for her return regardless of Tyler's potential interference. That evening, Megan texted that she had booked a flight leaving the following day. Tyler had returned to their villa intoxicated and fallen asleep, giving her the opportunity to make arrangements without confrontation. Less than 48 hours later, my daughter arrived at Portland International Airport, exhausted and shell-shocked, but physically unharmed. As I drove her home, she revealed more about the rapid deterioration of her brand-new marriage. It was like a switch flipped once we were alone in Bali, she explained, staring out the passenger window. All the thoughtfulness disappeared. He started questioning me about your finances, whether you owned your house outright, if you had investments, how much your nursing pension was worth. When Megan couldn't provide the detailed information he wanted, Tyler had become increasingly agitated, eventually admitting, during a drunken tirade, that he had expected significant financial gain from their marriage. He said he'd researched our family. She continued, her voice hollow. He was convinced you had received money from Grandpa Robert's estate that you were hiding. He called me a worthless investment when I couldn't confirm it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting the urge to reveal the truth about the inheritance. That conversation needed to happen, but not while Megan was still processing the immediate betrayal. Where is Tyler now? I asked instead. Still in Bali. He refused to change his flight. Said he'd at least get the vacation he paid for. She gave a bitter laugh, though I'm pretty sure it went on a credit card that was already maxed out. As we pulled into my driveway, Megan turned to me with tears streaming down her face. I was so stupid, Mom. Everyone could see it but me. You tried to warn me and I just thought you were being overprotective. I reached across to squeeze her hand. You weren't stupid, honey. You were in love with the person he pretended to be. That's not your fault. That night, Megan slept in her childhood bedroom while I stayed awake planning our next steps, knowing the real confrontation was yet to come. Tyler would return eventually, and when he did, we needed to be prepared for whatever tactics he might employ to salvage his financial scheme. 2 days later, as Megan and I were discussing her options with a divorce attorney by phone, Tyler arrived unannounced at my front door, his charm fully reinstated, and a bouquet of roses in hand, as though the honeymoon debacle had never occurred. The moment of reckoning had arrived sooner than expected. I opened my front door to find Tyler standing on the porch, immaculately dressed, despite the long flight from Bali. The roses he held were clearly expensive, long-stemmed, and perfect, probably purchased at the airport or a high-end florist en route. His smile appeared genuine to an untrained eye, but I could now see the calculation behind it. Jane, he greeted warmly. I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. Is Megan here? We had a bit of a misunderstanding on our honeymoon. His casual framing of emotional abuse as a misunderstanding confirmed everything Amanda had warned me about. This was a man accustomed to rewriting reality to serve his purposes. She is here, I replied, not returning his smile. Why don't you come in? We need to talk. Something in my tone must have alerted him that the situation wasn't going to unfold according to his script. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before the confident mask returned. Of course, I've been worried about her. I led him into the living room where Megan was sitting rigidly on the sofa. She had insisted on being present for this conversation, despite my suggestion that I could handle the initial confrontation. Seeing Tyler, her posture stiffened further, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Megan, sweetheart." Tyler began moving toward her with the roses extended. "I'm so sorry about our argument. The stress of the wedding and planning our future got to me. It won't happen again." Before Megan could respond, I intervened. "Tyler, please sit down. This isn't a reconciliation. It's a conversation about facts." His expression hardened briefly before he pivoted to a concerned frown. "I don't understand. We had one disagreement on our honeymoon, and suddenly everything is being blown out of proportion." One disagreement. Megan found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "You called me worthless. You said marrying me was a waste of time if I couldn't get money from my mother. You went through my phone while I was sleeping." Tyler's strategy shifted instantly to minimization and deflection. "I'd had too much to drink, Megan. You know I didn't mean those things. And checking your phone, I was just trying to find our flight information." "At 3 in the morning, she challenged. Seeing his charm offensive failing, Tyler changed tactics again, turning to me with an appeal to reason. "Jane, surely you understand how stressful merging lives can be. Megan and I just need time to adjust to marriage. All couples have rough patches." "Most couples don't have rough patches centered around accessing their mother-in-law's non-existent inheritance," I replied evenly. The reference to inheritance caught his attention immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed whether this was an acknowledgement or a denial of assets. "I don't know what Megan has told you, but I think there's been a significant misunderstanding. I've never been interested in family money." I reached for a folder on the coffee table, opening it deliberately. "That's not what you told your friend on the phone at the bridal shop, or what you said to your best man at the wedding reception, or what you explicitly stated to Megan in Bali." His facade slipped momentarily as he processed that his private conversations had been overheard. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention," I corrected. "Just as I paid attention to the unauthorized charges you attempted to make on my credit card from Bali, and the vendors you instructed to add services without approval, expecting me to cover the costs." Tyler's expression darkened, the charming mask falling away entirely. "So that's why the charges were declined. You've been interfering in our marriage from the beginning." "There is no marriage," Megan interjected firmly. "Not a real one. You married me thinking my mother had money you could access." "That's absurd," he scoffed, but his denial lacked conviction. "Your paranoia is concerning Megan. Perhaps you should talk to someone professional about these delusions." This gaslighting attempt, suggesting Megan's accurate perceptions were symptoms of mental instability, aligned perfectly with Amanda's description of Tyler's tactics. I had prepared Megan for this possibility, and she didn't waver. "I recorded our conversation in Bali," she stated, holding up her phone. "The one where you specifically said you married me because you thought my mother had inherited millions from my grandfather." The color drained from Tyler's face, but he recovered quickly. "You recorded me without consent. That's illegal." "Actually," I interjected, "Bali is a one-party consent jurisdiction for recordings, but that's hardly the point here." Tyler's demeanor shifted again, this time to indignation. "I don't have to sit here and be accused based on things said in the heat of an argument. Megan is my wife. Whatever issues we have, we'll work them out privately." "I don't want to work anything out," Megan replied, her voice stronger now. "I want an annulment." An annulment?" He laughed dismissively. "On what grounds?" "Fraud," I answered for her. "Entering into marriage under false pretenses with the specific intent to gain financial advantage." Tyler stood abruptly, pacing with barely contained anger. "This is ridiculous. You have no proof of any such intent." Actually, we do. I withdrew another document from the folder, a statement from Amanda Reeves detailing Tyler's pattern of targeting women for financial gain. You've done this before, twice that we know of. As I began reading portions of Amanda's statement aloud, Tyler's face contorted with recognition and fury. That psychotic ex is involved in this. She's been stalking me for years, feeding lies to anyone who will listen. The details she provided were quite specific, I noted calmly, and remarkably similar to your behavior with Megan. Tyler's strategic mind was visibly working, assessing options and potential escapes from the situation. Then his expression changed, a calculating smile spreading across his face. Fine. Let's be honest with each other, shall we? I knew your family had money, Jane. I did my research. Your father was Robert Winters of Winters Investment Group. When he died 3 years ago, his estate was valued at approximately $8 million. He looked triumphant. As his only living child, you inherited everything. You've been hiding it from Megan all this time. The revelation hung in the air. I kept my expression neutral, but Megan turned to me with confusion written across her face. Mom, is that true? Before I could respond, Tyler pressed his perceived advantage. She's been lying to you, Megan. While you worked for nonprofit wages, she's been sitting on millions. And now she's trying to turn you against me to keep controlling that money herself. This was the moment I had been dreading yet expecting, when my secret would be exposed in the worst possible context. I had planned to tell Megan the truth privately after Tyler was gone, but now I had no choice but to address it directly. Yes, I acknowledged, meeting my daughter's eyes. I did inherit money from your grandfather 3 years ago. I've been waiting for the right time to tell you. Megan's hurt was visible, but Tyler interjected before she could respond. You see, she's been manipulating you, keeping you dependent on your teacher's salary while hoarding millions. At least I was going to share wealth with you. That's enough, I said firmly, turning back to Tyler. How exactly did you learn about my inheritance? His smirk returned. Public records, death certificates, probate documents, basic research. Interesting, because my father's will and the transfer of assets were handled through a private trust specifically to keep them out of public records. I leaned forward slightly. The only people who know the exact amount are my financial team and attorney, all bound by confidentiality agreements. Tyler's momentary confusion was revealing. He'd clearly obtained the information through less legitimate means, possibly by paying someone for access to confidential records or hacking into systems. The specific amount doesn't matter. He recovered. The point is, you've been deceiving your daughter while accusing me of financial manipulation. The difference, I replied steadily, is that I wasn't using the money to control or manipulate anyone. I was protecting it first from my own impulsive decisions while grieving David, and later from people exactly like you. This is insane. Tyler spat, his charm completely evaporated now. Megan is my wife. Whatever you have will eventually be half hers, and by extension mine. That's how marriage works. Not when the marriage was entered into fraudulently, I countered, and not when the assets are protected by irrevocable trusts established before the marriage. This information visibly rattled him. What trusts? What are you talking about? After watching your interest in my financial situation, I consulted my attorney. The inheritance is now structured in a way that protects it from exactly the scenario you envisioned. I turned to Megan, softening my tone. The money will be yours eventually, honey, but it's secured against claims from marriages or other potential exploitation. Tyler's face flushed with anger as he realized his scheme was thoroughly derailed. In a last desperate pivot, he turned to Megan. Are you really going to let her control you like this? She's been lying to you for years. At least I was honest about wanting a better life for us. Honest? Megan's voice was quiet but steady. You told me you loved me for who I am. That was the lie that mattered. The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted the tense exchange. Through the window, I glimpsed a police cruiser parking at the curb my elderly neighbor had called them after hearing raised voices. I'd warned her earlier that there might be a confrontation and asked her to monitor the situation. Tyler saw them too and immediately recognized the precariousness of his position. His expression shifted rapidly through rage calculation and finally a cold determination. "This isn't over," he hissed, grabbing his jacket. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually," I replied, holding up my phone, "I've been recording this entire conversation. One-party consent applies in Oregon, too. Any further threats will be added to the file we're building for the annulment case." When the police officers knocked, I answered calmly, explaining there had been a family disagreement that was now resolving. Tyler, instantly transforming back into his charming persona, assured them everything was fine, and he was just leaving. As he walked out the door, he turned back with a final venomous glare. "You two deserve each other, a lying mother and a worthless daughter. Enjoy your millions alone." The officers escorted him to his car with a warning about returning, and we watched from the window as he drove away, his tires squealing slightly in petulant protest. When the police had gone, Megan turned to me, her expression a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and relief. $8 million all this time. The moment of truth had arrived. It was time for complete honesty, whatever the consequences for our relationship might be. The silence that filled the room after Tyler's departure felt heavy with unspoken questions. Megan stood by the window watching until his car disappeared around the corner before turning to face me. Her expression was unreadable, a complex mixture of emotions competing for dominance. I moved to the kitchen, a habitual response to tension. "Would you like some tea? This conversation might take a while." Megan followed wordlessly, sitting at the kitchen table where we had shared countless meals and conversations throughout her life. The familiar setting seemed to ground her slightly. $8 million, she finally said as I filled the kettle. "And you never told me." I placed 2 mugs on the table and sat across from her. "I should have told you sooner. I know that now." "Why didn't you?" Her voice wasn't accusatory, just profoundly confused. "We've always shared everything." The kettle whistled, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts as I prepared our tea chamomile for both of us, a childhood comfort during difficult conversations. "When I first received the notification about your grandfather's estate, I was still deep in grief over losing your father." I began sliding her mug across the table. "The inheritance felt tainted somehow. This money from a man who abandoned us, who never acknowledged you, who didn't even send a card when your father died." Megan wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "So you were going to refuse it?" "That was my first instinct, yes. I actually drafted an email declining the inheritance." I smiled faintly at the memory. "Then I sat in your father's garden, and I could almost hear him telling me how impractical that would be." "That sounds like Dad." Megan acknowledged, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. I decided to accept it, but I needed time to process what that meant for my life, for our lives. I was afraid it might change me, change us. Your father and I had always lived by certain values, and suddenly having millions felt like a test of those principles. "So you just kept it secret for 3 years?" I nodded, accepting the justified criticism in her tone. "At first, it was about giving myself space to make thoughtful decisions, rather than impulsive ones. I consulted financial advisors, set up the foundation in your father's name, paid off our mortgage." "I wondered how you could afford to retire early," Megan noted. "You said it was careful planning and your pension." "A partial truth that became a complete lie as time passed," I admitted. "The longer I waited to tell you, the more difficult it became to find the right moment. And then I met Tyler," she finished for me. "Yes." I hesitated, not wanting to reopen fresh wounds, but needing to be honest. When I saw how quickly your relationship progressed, how he seemed unusually interested in my financial situation, I became concerned. So you investigated him? It wasn't a question. I did. After you announced your engagement, I hired someone to look into his background. I met her eyes directly. I should have shared those findings with you immediately, but I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that it would damage our relationship when you needed support most. Megan was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this information. The investigator found Amanda, the other women he'd targeted. Eventually, yes. Initially, they just uncovered his financial problems, the credit card debt, the mortgage issues, the failed business ventures. Amanda found us on her own after seeing your wedding announcement. And keeping the inheritance secret. That was to protect the money from Tyler. I reached across the table, relieved when she didn't pull away from my touch. It was to protect you, Megan. If Tyler had known about the money before the wedding, he might have been even more determined to marry you, more careful about hiding his true nature until it was too late. She withdrew her hand, slowly processing this. But if I had known about the inheritance, I might have recognized his interest in our family's finances as the red flag it was. The observation struck me silent. She was right, of course. My secrecy had denied her information that might have helped her see through Tyler's facade earlier. In trying to protect her, I had inadvertently made her more vulnerable. You're right, I acknowledged. I made a mistake in not trusting you with the truth. I was so focused on protecting the money that I didn't consider how knowledge of it might have protected you. Megan stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen as she had often done when working through difficult problems. I'm angry with you for keeping such a huge secret, she said after several moments. But I'm also grateful that your secrecy prevented Tyler from accessing the money. Both things are true at the same time, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to decide how you feel right now, I offered. It's okay to be confused, to be angry and grateful simultaneously. She stopped pacing and leaned against the counter, studying me with eyes so like her father's, thoughtful and perceptive. Why are you telling me now? Just because Tyler forced your hand? No, I replied honestly. I was going to tell you today regardless. I had planned to wait until after he left when we could talk privately. The money is yours as much as mine. You deserve to know about it, as we figured out next steps with the annulment. Annulment? She repeated the word, seeming to remind her of the immediate practical concerns beyond our current conversation. We need to call the lawyer back, and I should probably freeze my accounts in case Tyler tries anything. I nodded, recognizing her shift to problem-solving mode, another trait she shared with David. We'll handle all of that. But first, I need to know if you can forgive me for keeping this secret, even if you understand why I did it. Megan returned to the table, her tea now cool but still untouched. I need time, Mom. This is a lot to process on top of everything else. Finding out my 3-day marriage was a sham, targeting money I didn't even know existed. It's overwhelming. Of course, I said, respecting her honesty. Take all the time you need. For now, she continued with remarkable composure given the circumstances. Let's focus on protecting ourselves from whatever Tyler might try next. The emotional sorting can come later. We spent the remainder of the morning making calls to her bank, to credit reporting agencies, to the lawyer who had been advising us on the annulment. Megan moved through these tasks with efficiency, her scientific mind approaching the dismantling of her marriage as methodically as she would analyze research data. That afternoon, as we were reviewing the prenuptial agreement, Tyler had pressured her to sign, which indeed contained clauses specifically targeting future inheritances. Megan paused suddenly. You know what's ironic, she said, looking up from the document. If you had told me about the inheritance when you received it, I probably would have insisted on helping pay for Dad's medical bills or financing environmental research. The money might have been gone or tied up by the time Tyler came along. The observation was startlingly accurate. Had I disclosed the inheritance immediately, our well-intentioned use of the funds might have left little for Tyler to target. My secrecy, while problematic in many ways, had inadvertently preserved the assets against the very threat I had later recognized. Life has a strange way of working out sometimes, I offered, though I wish the lesson hadn't come at such a high emotional cost to you. Megan closed the folder containing the prenup. I'll get through this. Thompson women are resilient, right? Isn't that what you always told me? For the first time that day, I saw a glimpse of the daughter I knew. Strong, insightful, capable of moving forward despite pain. The road ahead would be difficult with both Tyler's threats and our own relationship to repair, but in that moment, I felt cautiously hopeful that we would navigate it together. The inheritance that had come between us might now paradoxically become part of what brought us closer again, not through its monetary value, but through the shared experience of protecting what mattered most, our trust in each other. In the weeks following Tyler's confrontation, Megan and I established a new rhythm in our lives, one balanced precariously between handling the practical aftermath of her brief marriage and rebuilding the trust that had been damaged by my long-kept secret. The annulment proceedings began immediately with our attorney filing on grounds of fraud and misrepresentation. Tyler initially threatened to contest it, demanding a financial settlement in exchange for his cooperation. His lawyer, clearly unfamiliar with the evidence we had compiled, suggested Megan would need to provide significant compensation to avoid a lengthy public divorce. Our response was to forward the recorded conversations from Bali and my home, along with Amanda Reeves's sworn statement and documentation of Tyler's unauthorized credit card attempts. The settlement demands ceased immediately, though Tyler's personal harassment continued through text messages, social media, and occasional drive-bys of both our homes. After he appeared at Megan's workplace, causing a scene in the aquarium lobby, we obtained a temporary restraining order. The judge, reviewing the evidence of Tyler's explicit statements about marrying Megan for financial gain, granted the order without hesitation. Throughout this turbulent period, Megan stayed with me rather than returning to her apartment, where Tyler had a key and knowledge of the security system. We converted my home office into a temporary bedroom for her, establishing boundaries that gave her independence while ensuring her safety. Our conversations about the inheritance continued in fragments, sometimes late at night, over tea, sometimes during morning walks around the neighborhood. Megan's initial anger gradually evolved into thoughtful questioning about my decisions and plans for the money. "What made you finally decide to accept it?" she asked one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Beyond hearing your father's practical voice in my head, I smiled. I realized the inheritance could be a tool for good if used wisely. It couldn't erase your grandfather's absence from our lives, but it could create opportunities and security that your father and I always wanted for you. Like the David Thompson Science Education Foundation. I nodded. The foundation felt like transforming something complicated into something purely positive, using money from a father who abandoned his family to honor a father who dedicated his life to his family and students. These conversations helped heal the fracture in our relationship, allowing Megan to understand my thought process even while acknowledging that my approach had been imperfect. 3 weeks after Tyler's confrontation, Megan suggested we attend a support group for survivors of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. The group, organized by a local women's resource center, provided a safe space for sharing experiences and strategies for recovery. It was there that Megan met others who had fallen for similar schemes, intelligent, accomplished women whose only mistake had been trusting someone who had masterfully presented a false persona. Their stories helped alleviate her shame and self-recrimination, reinforcing that Tyler's behavior reflected his character flaws, not her judgment. The facilitator says many predators like Tyler specifically target smart, successful women, Megan told me after our third meeting. They see our intelligence as a challenge and our independence as something to be broken down. The support group also connected us with resources for improving security measures at both our homes. We installed new systems with cameras and mobile alerts, changed all the locks, and established emergency protocols with trusted neighbors. As the practical matters stabilized, we turned our attention to the inheritance itself. I invited Megan to meet with my financial team, offering complete transparency about the account's investments and structures I had established. "I don't want to control your access to this money any longer," I explained as we drove to the advisory firm's office. "You're 30 now with a solid career and clear values. It's time for you to be fully informed and involved in these decisions." The meeting was comprehensive with my advisors, explaining each component of the inheritance, from the conservative investment portfolio to the charitable foundation to the protective trusts I had established. The trusts were created specifically to protect against potential claims from Tyler, my attorney explained to Megan, but they serve a broader purpose of ensuring the assets are managed thoughtfully across generations. Megan asked insightful questions throughout the presentation, demonstrating the analytical mind that had made her successful in scientific research. She seemed particularly interested in the foundation's structure and mission. "Would it be possible to expand the foundation's focus to include marine education programs?" she asked. Combining Dad's love of science, teaching with my work in marine biology, her engagement with the foundation's possibilities, rather than the personal wealth component, spoke volumes about her character. Despite her recent trauma, her instinct was to consider how the money could create positive impact, rather than personal comfort. After reviewing the full financial picture, I made an offer I had been considering since the confrontation with Tyler. "I'd like to help you restart," I said as we left the advisor's office. "A new apartment in a secure building, money to replace anything you don't want to retrieve from your old place, perhaps even a sabbatical from work if you need time to heal." To my surprise, Megan shook her head. "I appreciate that, Mom, but no. I need to stand on my own right now. Using the inheritance to solve my problems would feel too much like what Tyler wanted, accessing family money as an easy solution." Her refusal of financial assistance when it was finally and freely offered demonstrated a resilience and integrity that filled me with pride. This was the daughter David and I had raised independent, principled, and determined to face challenges on her own terms. "I understand," I told her, "but the offer remains open if you change your mind." 2 months after the confrontation, we received news that Tyler had left Portland. According to our attorney's sources, he had moved to Phoenix after several of his business associates discovered the truth about his schemes through the grapevine of professional connections. His departure brought palpable relief, though we maintained our security measures as a precaution. The annulment was granted after 90 days, officially erasing the legal bond between Megan and Tyler. We marked the occasion with a quiet dinner at home rather than a celebration, acknowledging that while the legal matter was resolved, the emotional healing would continue. "I keep thinking about the parallels," Megan said as we shared dessert that evening. "Grandpa abandoned you when you were 12. Tyler abandoned me when I was 29. But the differences in how we've handled it are significant." "How so?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "You closed yourself off from Grandpa completely understandably, so given your age and the circumstances. But that closure included shutting out the inheritance initially, seeing it as tainted." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm trying